Hi, I'm Dr. Ellis Orozco, and thanks for listening to this video podcast. I hope you have a great weekend. Hi, and thanks for listening in. I wanted to talk this weekend a little bit about what it looks like to love your enemy. There's this one place in the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus says, "You've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, love your enemy." And so there's been all kinds of things going on in the world right now that are just pretty disturbing for many people. What's happening with North Korea, what's happening in the Middle East with the embassy being moved to Jerusalem and all the turmoil surrounding that, several thousand dying in those demonstrations. So it's a time like this, I think, that we need to really focus in on what it looks like really to follow Jesus' command to love our enemies. Ramadan is starting actually today for Muslims all over the world, and some people would look at Muslims as being somewhat of an enemy to Christians. I don't agree with that, but if you look at them as being an enemy, then how do you begin to pray for your enemies? Jesus prayed all the time, and we don't have the manuscripts of most of his prayers, but his longest prayer is recorded in John chapter 17. And in that prayer, he talks about praying for his disciples and praying for the world. And so I wanted to look at a couple of things out of that prayer to just talk a little bit about how we pray for our enemies. The first thing Jesus says in that prayer, he asks God to glorify the Son. And I think that when we're praying for the world, when we're praying for those on the other side of the world, when we're praying for those who maybe live in complete darkness, like many in North Korea, we should be praying that God would glorify his Son, Jesus, that God would make Jesus known to people who need to see the light that Jesus brings. And so we begin by praying for God to glorify his Son, Jesus. And then the other thing that he prays for in that prayer is he prays that his disciples would be one. He prays for unity among his disciples, his people, his children. Mm-hmm. And so I think we should be praying for the unity of Christians all over the world, that we would all come together and understand the radical love ethic of Jesus Christ, that we would begin to live out his command to not just love each other, but to love even our enemies. And then Jesus prays for the protection of all of his disciples, but not just of his disciples, but also the protection of those that his disciples are trying to reach. Jesus prays for peace, that peace would always prevail. So as we go into this weekend, where many of our Muslim friends all over the world will be observing one of the most sacred holidays of their faith, where we know that in Jerusalem there's extraordinary turmoil right now, and where we know that many of our leaders are going into some kind of communications with North Korea, a country that has been in the dark for so many years. It's time for us as Christians to come together with one spirit and to pray for our enemies. So I would challenge you this weekend to spend some time praying for your family, for your friends, for Christians all over the world, but most importantly, pray for those that you consider to be your enemies. I hope you take that to heart. Have a great weekend.